Have you ever heard something that made your whole body go cold, like the air just got sucked out of the room? Because that's exactly what happened to me the night I stopped in front of our bedroom door and heard my husband practicing wedding vows to another woman. Not on the phone. Not whispering to someone hiding in the house. Just him, standing in front of the mirror, smiling like a lovesick teenager, saying a name that definitely was not mine. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't barge in. I stood there, barefoot on the carpet, one hand gripping the door frame, and in that moment, I realized my marriage wasn't just cracking. It was already gone. And what did I do next? Oh, stay with me, because I didn't walk away quietly. For 14 years, I truly believed I was standing on solid ground. Not the kind that feels exciting and new, but the kind that feels dependable, familiar, and safe. The kind of marriage where you stop worrying about what could go wrong, because you've already weathered so many storms together that you assume nothing could really shake you anymore. We weren't one of those couples who posted constant love declarations online or made a big show out of romance, but I thought that was a good thing. I believed real love looked quieter, steadier, built on routine and mutual understanding rather than fireworks. We had inside jokes no one else would understand, a rhythm to our days, and a shared history that felt too deep to unravel. I trusted him in ways I didn't even realize I was trusting him. I trusted that when he said he was tired, he really was. That when he said work was stressful, that was the whole story. That when he held my hand in public, it meant the same thing it always had. Trust like that isn't loud, it lives in the small, everyday moments. The way you don't check phones. The way you don't question late nights. The way you defend your partner when someone else casually complains about marriage. I was that woman. The one who said, "He's not perfect, but he's good to me." The one who believed loyalty was already settled, already proven by time. Our life together felt earned. We built it piece by piece, through lean years and better ones. There were times when money was tight, when stress hung heavy in the house, when conversations turned into silence, because both of us were too tired to talk. But I saw those things as normal, as part of growing older together. I didn't see distance as danger. I saw it as comfort. I thought the quiet meant peace, not neglect. Looking back now, I realize how easy it is to confuse familiarity with safety. I believed that longevity meant immunity. 14 years felt like armor, like proof that whatever temptations or cracks existed in other marriages couldn't touch ours. I told myself that affairs happened to couples who didn't communicate, who didn't know each other, who rushed into things. Not to people like us. Not to a woman who remembered her husband's coffee order by heart and folded his clothes the way he liked. Not to a marriage that had survived grief, setbacks, and change. That belief made me blind in ways I didn't want to admit. I didn't notice how we stopped asking each other deeper questions. How conversations became logistical instead of emotional. Who's picking up groceries? What time are you getting home? Did you pay the bill? We functioned well, and I mistook that for intimacy. I didn't notice how his laughter had changed, how it came easier when he was texting than when he was sitting across from me. I didn't question it, because questioning it felt like betraying the image of us I had built in my mind. There's a dangerous comfort in thinking you know someone completely. When you've shared years, habits, and space, you assume there are no hidden rooms left to discover. I thought I knew his moods, his tells, his rhythms. I thought I could read him. But what I really knew was the version of him he chose to show me, the one that fit neatly into our established life. I didn't realize that while I was holding on to what we had been, he was quietly imagining what he could become without me. The illusion wasn't just about him. It was about who I thought I was in that marriage. I saw myself as secure, chosen, settled. I believed my place was permanent, unquestioned. That belief shaped how I moved through the world. I didn't guard my heart, because I didn't think I needed to. I didn't prepare for loss because I didn't think loss was possible. I invested fully, assuming the return was guaranteed. That's the danger of comfort, when it isn't grounded in truth. What hurts the most about illusions like that isn't the eventual betrayal. It's the realization that while you were living in certainty, someone else was living in options. That while you were protecting the marriage in your mind, someone else was quietly loosening their grip on it. I wasn't foolish because I loved him. I was vulnerable because I believed time itself was a promise. And that belief, as comforting as it felt, left me unprepared for the moment everything I thought was solid turned out to be nothing more than a carefully maintained appearance, one I trusted without question, one that would soon collapse the second I stopped believing in it. It wasn't a dramatic moment at first. There was no crash, no scream, no sudden confrontation that announced everything was about to change. It was quiet in the way that makes your senses sharpen without your permission. I remember slowing my steps without realizing I was doing it, like my body knew something before my mind was ready to accept it. His voice drifted through the door, softer than usual, almost careful. That alone felt wrong. There was a warmth in it I hadn't heard in a long time, a tone that didn't belong to casual conversation or habit. It sounded intentional, like each word mattered. At first, my brain tried to protect me. I told myself he was on a call, maybe joking around, maybe watching something on his phone. I wanted a harmless explanation, because harmless explanations are easier to live with. But the closer I got, the clearer his words became, and with each step, denial got harder to hold on to. He wasn't talking to anyone else. He was talking to himself. Rehearsing. Practicing. Saying promises out loud, the kind of promises that are supposed to be shared only once in a lifetime. I felt my chest tighten, as if my breath had suddenly become optional. My heart started pounding so hard it felt intrusive, like it was going to give me away. I stood still, barely daring to move, afraid that even the smallest sound would break whatever fragile moment was happening and force me to face it head-on. Part of me wanted to burst through the door and demand answers immediately. Another part of me was frozen, rooted to the floor, absorbing every word, because once you hear something like that, you can never unhear it. When he said the vows, I felt a strange sense of familiarity mixed with disbelief. Some of the words sounded like things he had once said to me, years ago, when we were younger and everything felt possible. That familiarity hurt more than if they had been completely different. It felt like he had taken something sacred from our past and repurposed it for someone else, like I was listening to a recycled version of my own memories being handed to another woman. Then came the name. Clear. Confidence. Spoken without hesitation. Not my name. In that instant, the confusion evaporated and was replaced by something sharper, colder. It was like the world tilted slightly, just enough to knock me off balance. My mind raced through possibilities I didn't want to consider, but the truth landed heavy and undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a joke. This was my intention. I remember gripping the edge of the wall, grounding myself, because my legs felt weak, like they might give out. There was a buzzing in my ears, a pressure behind my eyes, but no tears came. Shock has a way of suspending emotion, placing you in a strange space where you're hyper-aware and completely numb at the same time. I was watching my life fracture in real time, yet everything around me looked exactly the same. The hallway. The carpet. The quiet hum of the house. It was unsettling how ordinary everything felt, while my entire understanding of my marriage was collapsing. What stayed with me most in that moment wasn't anger. It was clear. A sharp, sudden awareness that something fundamental had shifted. I realized that whatever version of reality I had been living in up until that second was no longer valid. I understood, almost instinctively, that reacting emotionally would only give him control over the narrative. I didn't want answers fueled by panic, or lies shaped to calm me down. I wanted the truth, and I knew I wouldn't get it by charging in unprepared. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I stayed silent. I stepped back from the door, carefully, quietly, like I was backing away from something dangerous. My hands were trembling, but my mind was surprisingly steady. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, even though nothing had physically changed yet. One path led to immediate confrontation, chaos, and denial. The other led to patience, observation, and understanding the full scope of what was happening before making a move. When he walked out of the bedroom minutes later, smiling like nothing was wrong, that clarity only deepened. The ease with which he slipped back into our normal routine told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. The kiss on my cheek didn't comfort me, it confirmed my suspicions. It showed me how practiced he was at pretending, how effortlessly he could switch between versions of himself. In that moment, the discovery stopped being just about another woman. It became about deception, about how well someone can hide a parallel life right under your nose. I realized that the man I thought I knew so completely had layers I had never been allowed to see. And standing there, listening to him talk about his day, as if he hadn't just pledged his future to someone else in our bedroom, I understood that the real discovery wasn't the vows or the name, but the fact that I had been sharing my life with a stranger who had grown comfortable lying to my face, and that understanding settled in quietly, firmly, without drama, marking the exact moment everything changed and there was no going back. Silence didn't come naturally to me at first. Every instinct in my body was screaming to confront him, to demand explanations, to force the truth out into the open where I could see it clearly and react the way a hurt wife is expected to react. I had entire arguments playing out in my head, imagined conversations where I caught him off guard and watched him scramble for excuses. But somewhere beneath all that noise, there was a quieter voice reminding me that the person who reacts first often loses control of the story. And I wasn't ready to lose anything more than I already had. So I chose quiet. Not the kind that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from restraint. I spoke when I needed to, smiled when it was expected, and went about my days as if nothing had changed, even though everything had. It felt unnatural. At first, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, but I understood that silence gave me something confrontation never could. Time. Space. Perspective. The ability to see what was really happening without the interference of his explanations or my emotions. Once I stopped reacting, I started noticing details I had previously brushed aside. The way he angled his phone away from me when he sat on the couch. How he suddenly needed privacy for conversations that used to happen openly. The pattern of his late nights, the specific days of the week when work seemed to demand more of him than usual. Silence sharpened my awareness. I wasn't distracted by the need to argue or fix things. I was simply watching. There was power in that observation. Each small detail on its own could be dismissed, explained away, or forgiven. Together, they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. I began to understand how long this had likely been going on, how comfortable he had become living two lives. And the more I watched, the clearer it became that he believed I was unaware, that my quietness was proof of ignorance rather than intention. That belief made him careless. I realized that silence unsettles people who are hiding something. When you don't ask questions, they start filling in the gaps themselves. He began offering unnecessary explanations for things I hadn't questioned, volunteering details that didn't quite line up. He was nervous, and that nervousness was telling. Every time he over-explained, I learned something new. Every time he assumed I wasn't paying attention, he revealed another piece of the truth. Emotionally, staying quiet was exhausting. There were moments when the weight of what I knew felt too heavy to carry alone. I'd go into the bathroom, close the door, and just breathe, grounding myself, so I wouldn't break down in front of him. I cried in the car, in the shower, in moments where I could release everything without consequence. Silence didn't mean I wasn't hurting. It meant I was choosing when and how to let that hurt show. I also noticed how my quietness shifted the dynamic between us. He seemed more relaxed, almost relieved. He laughed more, moved more freely, as if the absence of suspicion gave him permission to be less careful. That freedom was exactly what I needed him to feel. The more secure he felt in my supposed ignorance, the more honest his behavior became. He wasn't honest with words, but with habits, and habits are harder to fake. Silence gave me the chance to separate my emotions from my decisions. I could feel angry without acting angry. I could feel betrayed without letting that betrayal dictate my next move. It allowed me to think clearly about what I wanted, what I deserved, and what I was no longer willing to accept. Instead of being pulled into his reality, I stayed grounded in my own. There's a misconception that staying quiet means being weak or passive. In reality, it takes immense strength to hold your tongue when you're hurting. It takes discipline to resist the urge for immediate validation or apology. I wasn't waiting for him to confess. I wasn't hoping he'd suddenly choose me. I was gathering information, understanding the situation fully, and preparing myself for whatever came next. The longer I stayed silent, the more I realized how much control I had regained. I wasn't reacting to his choices anymore. I was responding to my own needs. I was no longer trying to save the marriage or fix him. I was focused on protecting myself, emotionally and practically. Silence became my shield, my strategy, my way of reclaiming agency in a situation where I had initially felt powerless. By choosing silence, I gave myself the gift of clarity. I saw him as he was, not as I wanted him to be. I saw the gaps between his words and his actions, the ease with which he compartmentalized his life. And as painful as that realization was, it was also liberating. I understood that I didn't owe him my emotions on demand, that I didn't need to explain my quietness, or justify my restraint. I was allowed to observe, to process, to plan in my own time, and in that quiet space, I became stronger, more aware, and more prepared than he ever imagined, standing calmly in the silence while he unknowingly revealed exactly who he had become. Preparation didn't look dramatic from the outside. There were no secret meetings in dark rooms, or sudden changes anyone could point to. It happened quietly, led into my everyday life, disguised as routine. On the surface, I was still the same wife going to work, cooking dinner, asking how his day went. Inside, though, something had shifted from emotional survival to strategic thinking. Once I accepted that the marriage I believed in no longer existed, I understood that feelings alone weren't going to protect me. Knowledge would. I started with information. Not accusations, not assumptions, but facts. I paid attention to things I had previously trusted him to handle. Bank statements, shared accounts, automatic payments. I told myself I was just organizing, just getting things in order, but really I was making sure I understood the full picture of our life together. What we owned. What we owed. Where the money moved. I needed to know how exposed I was before anything blew up. Every number told a story, and those stories mattered more than any apology he might eventually offer. I made copies of everything. Quietly. Methodically. Documents that I'd never thought twice about before suddenly became important. Mortgage papers. Insurance policies. Retirement accounts. Things that felt boring when everything was fine became critical when I realized how quickly stability can disappear. I didn't take anything out of place. I didn't leave gaps he might notice. Preparation is most effective when it doesn't announce itself. Emotionally, I trained myself to stay steady. That was harder than gathering paperwork. There were days when anger surged so suddenly it felt physical, like heat under my skin. Other days, sadness crept in quietly and settled heavy in my chest. I let myself feel all of it, just not in front of him. I reminded myself constantly that showing my hand too early would only give him time to adapt, to hide, to reshape the truth in his favor. Control didn't come from confrontation. It came from timing. I also sought guidance, carefully and privately. I didn't confide in friends who might let something slip or push me to act before I was ready. Instead, I chose professionals whose job was clarity, not comfort. The first conversation with a lawyer grounded me in reality. I learned what the law saw, not what my heart felt. What I was entitled to. What I needed to protect. What mistakes people often make when they act out of emotion instead of planning. That knowledge was empowering in a way I hadn't expected. Every step I took reduced the fear a little more. Fear thrives in uncertainty, and preparation shrinks it. As I learned more, I felt less reactive. I stopped imagining worst-case scenarios because I was actively preventing them. I wasn't waiting for him to decide my future. I was shaping it myself, quietly, deliberately. Meanwhile, he grew more relaxed. That was the strangest part. My calm made him comfortable. He mistook my composure for ignorance, my kindness for blindness. He didn't see preparation, he saw permission. He continued his routines, his late nights, his casual lies, unaware that each day made my position stronger. His confidence became my advantage. I adjusted my behavior just enough to maintain the illusion. I didn't suddenly become distant or suspicious. I stayed consistent. Predictable. That consistency reassured him, and reassurance made him careless. He didn't guard his words as closely. He didn't double-check his stories. Preparation thrives on patterns, and he gave me plenty. There was also a quiet rebuilding happening inside me. As I prepared practically, I was also detaching emotionally. I stopped seeking validation from him. I stopped measuring my worth through his attention, or lack of it. I focused on myself, my routines, my sense of identity outside the marriage. That internal shift was just as important as the legal and financial steps. I wasn't preparing to fight for him. I was preparing to stand without him. By the time everything was in place, I felt calm in a way that surprised me. Not numb. Not cold. Just resolved. I knew what was coming, and I knew I could handle it. Preparation gave me options, and options gave me power. Whatever he planned, whatever future he imagined with someone else, I was no longer caught off guard, or dependent on his choices. I had built a quiet foundation beneath myself, one he never noticed forming, one that would hold steady when the truth finally surfaced, and everything he thought was under his control began to slip out of his hands. By the time everything came into the open, I wasn't chasing revenge fueled by rage. I wasn't interested in yelling, exposing him publicly, or making a spectacle of my pain. That kind of reaction might feel satisfying for a moment, but it fades quickly and often leaves you emptier than before. What I wanted was something deeper, something lasting. I wanted justice that didn't require me to lose myself in the process. I wanted to walk away knowing I had protected my dignity, my future, and my sense of self, and that meant choosing a kind of revenge that didn't look like revenge at all. When I finally spoke, it wasn't impulsive. Every word had weight, because I wasn't saying them to be heard. I was saying them to be final. I watched his face shift as he realized I wasn't confused, wasn't guessing, and wasn't asking for explanations. There's a specific look people get when they understand the version of you they underestimated no longer exists. That moment wasn't loud, but it was powerful. I wasn't there to negotiate my worth or compete with another woman. I was there to close a chapter on my own terms. What surprised me most was how quickly the power dynamic changed. For so long, without realizing it, I had been reacting to his choices, adjusting my emotions around his behavior. At that moment, the balance tipped. He was the one scrambling, searching for words that might soften the outcome. Apologies came fast, layered with regret and promises that arrived far too late. I listened without interruption, not because I needed to hear him out, but because I wanted him to understand that his words no longer had control over me. Walking away with dignity doesn't mean you don't feel anger or hurt. It means you refuse to let those emotions dictate actions that harm you in the long run. I didn't beg him to stay, and I didn't try to hurt him back emotionally. I simply removed my presence from his life in a way that was structured, informed, and irreversible. There is a quiet devastation in being left without drama, without chaos, without the reassurance that you still matter enough to provoke a reaction. The real revenge revealed itself over time, not in that single moment. It showed up in the way my life began to stabilize while he unraveled. I had prepared for independence, and he had prepared for escape. When his fantasy collapsed under the weight of reality, there was no safety net waiting for him. The future he imagined required me to be passive, forgiving, and predictable. Instead, he was met with consequences he hadn't planned for. There was also an unexpected peace that followed. Not happiness right away, not relief in the way movies portray it, but peace rooted in self-respect. I slept better knowing I hadn't compromised myself. I spoke more confidently, because I wasn't carrying secrets anymore. I moved through the world lighter, no longer burdened by someone else's deception. That peace was something he couldn't take from me, no matter how the situation unfolded for him. People often think revenge means making the other person feel your pain. I learned that true revenge is refusing to carry that pain forward. It's choosing a future where their actions don't define your narrative. I didn't need him to suffer publicly. I needed him to understand, privately, that he lost access to a woman who once loved him fully, trusted him completely, and would have stood by him if he had chosen honesty. That loss is permanent, and it doesn't fade with time. What stayed with me most wasn't his regret, but my own growth. I discovered a version of myself that could endure betrayal without becoming bitter, that could be strategic without becoming cruel. I learned that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as calm resolve, as boundaries that don't bend, as silence that doesn't seek validation. I didn't walk away victorious because he was defeated. I walked away victorious because I chose myself without apology. In the end, my life didn't become perfect, but it became honest. Every step forward was mine, earned through clarity and courage rather than illusion. I no longer wondered what he was doing or who he was becoming. My focus shifted inward, toward building something real, something rooted in truth. And that, more than any confrontation or public exposure, was the ending he never expected and the beginning I didn't know I was capable of creating, standing firmly in my own worth, carrying my dignity forward, fully aware that the most powerful revenge is a life rebuilt so completely that the person who tried to replace you no longer has a place in it.